Hi, my name is Daniel Castillo, and my partners are Paola, Guerrero, and Anjelica Espinoza, and we're going to be talking about plant reproduction. Flowering involves a change in gene expression in the shoot apex. Flowers are the reproductive organs of angiospermophytes and develop from the shoot apex, as shown below. Changes in gene expression trigger the enlargement of the shoot apical meristem. This tissue then differentiates to form the different flower structures: sepals, petals, stamen, and pistils. The activation of genes responsible for flowering is influenced by abiotic factors like summer, winter, spring, and fall. The most common trigger for a change in gene expression is day-night length, also called as photoperiodism. The summer days are typically longer and winter and fall days are typically shorter. The purpose of flowering is to enable the plant to sexually reproduce via pollination, fertilization, and seed dispersal. Unfortunately, plants blossom when there's an abundance of pollinators, which is typically towards the summer. Some plants bloom during the longer days, which are summer days. Some plants bloom during the shorter days, winter and fall. The length of these days are detected by the phytochromes inside the plants. Phytochromes are leaf pigments which are used by the plant to detect periods of light and darkness. The response of the plant to the relative lengths of light and darkness is called photoperiodism. Like I said before, there are two forms of photochromes. There is an active and an inactive phytochrome.
U3. Reproduction in plants. Success in plant reproduction depends on pollination, fertilization, and seed dispersal. Plants can reproduce in multiple different ways. Vegetative propaganda, which is asexual reproduction from a plant splitting. Spore formation on molds, ferns, etc. And pollen transfer on flowering plants or angiospermophytes. Sexual reproduction in flowering plants involves the transfer of pollen, male gamete, to an ova, female gamete. This involves three distinct phases: pollination, fertilization, and seed dispersal. Pollination. The transfer of pollen grains from an anther, the male plant structure, to a stigma, the female plant structure. Many plants possess both male and female structures, monoecious, and can potentially self-pollinate. From an evolutionary perspective, cross-pollination is preferable as it improves genetic diversity. Fertilization. Fusion of a male gamete nuclei with a female gamete to form a zygote. In plants, the male gamete is stored in the pollen grain, and the female gamete is found in the ovule. Seed dispersal. Fertilization of gametes results in the formation of the seed, which moves away from the parent plant. This seed dispersal reduces competition for resources between the germinating seed and the parental plant. There is a variety of seed dispersal mechanisms, including wind, fruits, and animals. Seed structure will vary depending on the mechanism of dispersal employed by the plant. Pollinators are involved in a mutualistic relationship with the flowering plant, whereby both species benefit from the interaction. Common examples of pollinators include birds, insects, bees, bats, and butterflies. Flowers may be structured to optimize access for certain pollinators. For example, tube-shaped flowers for birds with long beaks. Cross-pollination is pollination of a flower or plant with pollen from another flower or plant. 9.4.S1. When fertilization occurs, the ovule will develop into a seed, which may be contained within a fruit. The seed will be dispersed from the parental plant and will then germinate, giving rise to a new plant. Germination is the development of a plant from a seed or spore after a period of dormancy. A typical seed will possess the following features. Testa. An outer seed coat that protects the embryonic plant. Micropyle. A small pore in the outer covering of the seed that allows for the passage of water. Codletin. Contains the food stored for the seed and forms the embryonic leaves. Plumule. The embryonic shoot, also called the epicotyl. Radicle. The embryonic root.
In today's notes, we're going to learn about 9.4, Understanding 4. Most flowering plants use mutualistic relationships with pollinators in sexual reproduction. For starters, what's a pollinator? When it comes to plants, pollinators help in cross-pollination, which is moving pollen grains from one plant to the ovule of another plant. An example of a pollinator is a bee, which help with the cross-pollination. They move pollen from one plant to another. Just like the bee, birds also help with the cross-pollination. Now that we know that bees and birds are pollinators, what's the relationship between a pollinator and a plant? They have a mutualistic relationship. So, what's a mutualistic relationship? A mutualistic relationship is when both sides benefit from the relationship. And the pollinators are in a mutualistic relationship. How does the plant benefit from this relationship? A flowering plant can and is able to cross-pollinate. Plants benefit more from cross-pollination than self-pollination. Due to in cross-pollination, the plant has a higher percentage in genetic diversity. So, how does a pollinator benefit? It gains a source of nutrient, both in the nectar, carbohydrate source, and pollen, protein source. Now, let's focus on 9.4 skill 2, drawing of a hack views of animals pollinated for our. Okay, let's start with the male part, which is called the stamen. It is composed of the anther, which is pollen-producing organ, and the filament, which is a slender stalk supporting anther. Now, let's talk about the pistil, or how other people call it, the carpel, which is the female part, which is composed of three things. The stigma, which is a long, sticky, receptive tip, and catches pollen. And the style, which is a tube-shaped connection between the stigma and the ovule, which contains female productive parts and turns into seed after fertilization. And this is the petal, which is brightly colored, modified leaves to attract pollinators. For example, bees and birds. Then there's also the sepal, which is an outer covering that protects flower bud. And lastly, the peduncle, which is the stalk of flower.